Right. Good afternoon, everyone that's here in person and out there on Facebook. So I'm Dr. Lewis. I'm going to be going over some fun and exciting changes that we're implementing starting Q2. So I'll start off with a little bit about us, who we are as the Empowerment Zone. So it might be a little bit difficult for those of you who are watching via live stream to see the screen. Can we bring this closer? Maybe. We're going to try to bring that a little bit closer, but certainly this will be recorded and saved for future reference. So this is a little bit about the Empowerment Zone. What is important for folks to understand, two things. One, the Empowerment Zone consists of 5 schools. So it's Coquillard, where we are this evening, as well as Harrison Elementary, Warren, Wilson, and then Navarre Middle School. The second important thing for folks to really understand as it comes to the Empowerment Zone is our governance structure. The Empowerment Zone has a separate board from the SBCSC school district, right? 2 of the elected board members, that's Leslie Wesley and Stephanie Ball, sit on the Empowerment Zone board, and then the other board members are appointed via the community at large, starting out with IDOE when the Empowerment Zone went into inception in 2019. So it's a separate board of directors. If families want to speak to the board, it is not the district board, it is a different board. All right, the school district has almost nothing to do with the Empowerment Zone. And it's important that folks understand that. And so the organizational structure, there is the board of directors, which I just talked about. Then there is the zone chief, which I have the privilege of serving in that role. And then we have a chief of staff. We have our 5 principals for each of the schools. And then we have 3 executive directors. We have an executive director for student services, and she's with us, Ms. Marissa Davis, and so she oversees all of the student services, so student wellness, partnerships, clubs, sports, the student experience. All of those areas fall under Ms. Davis. Our new chief of staff, didn't mean to pass her by, Ms. Julia Tao. She's with us this evening as well. We have one of our 5 principals, Ms. Carla Lee, at Harrison Elementary. She's with us. And then one of our assistant principals here at Coquillard, she is with us as well. Then we have an executive director for teaching and learning, so that's all academics and instruction. She's here with us, and that is Ms. Roxana Zapata. And so she oversees everything from curriculum to teacher support, professional development, or data and accountability work. And then finally, our executive director of business services and our general counsel, Ms. Rhonda Ross. So she handles the operations, the finances of the Empowerment Zone. So again, it's important for folks to understand that the Empowerment Zone is a completely separate structure than the school district. So coming into the school year, our leadership team identified 2 key priorities that we wanted to focus on. So the first, keeping your children safe. That is my top priority. More than making sure that they can read and write, which is just as important, I have to keep the kids safe. It's important to me that your kids go home every single day, that they're safe, they're healthy. And by safe, I mean physically, physiologically, emotionally, psychologically. I have to keep your children safe. So that's my top priority. Second to that is improving the culture of our schools so that our teachers can focus on teaching and our students can focus on learning. So those were our top 2 priorities for these school year. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about what's working thus far this school year. So we have a couple of wins. So we had a great launch to the school year by all accounts. The launch this school year is the most successful we've had in recent history. So that's a win. We have stable and consistent staffing So coming into the role, even as I was learning about the empowerment zone, before accepting the role, a lot of the feedback that I got was that there was a lot of turnover in the empowerment zone. And so we retained 60% of our staff from last year. Definitely room for improvement there, but in large part, we had a high turnover, we had a high retention from our staffing from last year to this year. So that's definitely a win. Another win for us is transportation. So if you've been a parent, a family in the empowerment zone, you know that we have a different transportation system. We use First Students as opposed to the district transportation. And the feedback that we've gotten is that that was the right decision. Our buses are on time, and we don't have a lot of issues with transportation. So that's certainly a win. And then, again, going back to what my first priority was, increased safety and security measures. So coming into the start of the school year, the first thing I did was to do an audit of all of our buildings. I went around, I checked fire alarms. We increased security cameras in some buildings. We made sure that our staff got the requisite training that they needed, and there's still a lot of work to do there. But we had some improvements in our safety and security measures. We're happy to be piloting the safe visitor system. So moving forward, any visitor coming into the building will need to go through the safe visitor system, and that way we'll be able to know exactly who's coming into our building. So again, increased safety and security measures, another big win. So what's not working thus far? What's not working? So number one, students are not coming to school consistently and on time, right? And if the kiddos aren't at school, they're not learning. So we need kiddos to come to school consistently on time. Second thing that's not working, our teachers are spending more time dealing with discipline and behavior as opposed to their teaching, right? So when I go into classrooms, teachers are spending way too much time having to correct student behavior, deal with individual students or the entire class, as opposed to getting through their lessons, which means that kids aren't learning as much as they ought to be. What else is not working? Administrators are spending more time dealing with building-wide disciplinary issues. So we have kids that just like to walk out of their classrooms and wander around the building. That's a safety issue. Just recently at one of our elementary schools, a student ran out the building, almost got hit by a car, right? So imagine in the middle of the school day, a student just elopes, runs off. Now suddenly all the administrators, everyone needs to stop what they're doing to try to chase after this child and prevented what could have been otherwise a very terrible accident. And when our administrators have to spend time dealing with a lot of these issues, then they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is in classrooms, watching teachers, providing coaching and support to teachers. What else is not working? Our students are not fully prepared or fully engaged for the learning that's happening in our buildings. They're distracted. They're not fully prepared or engaged for the learning that's happening in our buildings. And then finally, the homeschool partnership and support. I'm not a parent personally, but having done this job for the last 16 years, I know that for parents it is challenging and frustrating to always hear from the school primarily when it's something negative. And so then when the phone rings and we see it's from the school, we don't answer because it's going to be something negative. Or when the school says we need you to come up, we don't come up because we have other priorities as parents, or we don't feel that the school wants to hear from us, or that there's anything we have to do that will support the school in the education of our children. So these are the things that are currently not working. And this is why we are trying to do this reset so that we can tackle these things. So starting with the first one, and we're going through this in sequence based on what's not working. Students are not coming to school consistently and on time. So attendance. This is our most basic requirement. We expect our students to come to school and that they come to school every single day. They come to school on time. Our elementary schools, the day starts at 7:50 a.m. That's every single day, 7:50. The school day ends at 3 p.m., except on Thursdays, and that will begin on December 1st. So starting December 1st, every Thursday we will dismiss early. For elementary school, that will be 1 p.m. For middle school, that will be 2 p.m. All right? For our middle school, the day starts at 8:45 and ends at 4 p.m., except on Thursdays, where it will end at 2 p.m. All right? So again, for elementary school, the day starts at 7:50, not 8:50, not 9:50. We need the kiddos here bright and early in the morning so that they can get breakfast and be ready for the rigorous learning that they're going to engage in over the course of the day. And they are here until 3 p.m., not 2 o'clock. We understand, families, that you have things to do, but we need them here until the end of the day. And then on Thursdays, we dismiss early. The early dismissal, again, will begin December 1st. Middle school, day starts at 8:45, and it ends at 4, except on Thursdays, starting December 1st, it will end at 2 p.m. Now, this is important because across our 5 schools, on average, students are missing about 20 days of school. So they're not learning if they're not in school. So we need them in the building. Of course, we are bound by law to follow the Indiana truancy and compulsory school attendance law. Families, please work with us. We've talked about some of these things before, but on this slide, I do want to highlight we do not differentiate between an excused absence and an unexcused absence. All right? An absence is an absence. We understand that there are times where you need to have doctor's appointments and things of that nature. We ask that you try to schedule that in the afternoon or during the breaks, winter break, Thanksgiving break, fall break, spring break. But sometimes these things are unavoidable. Try to schedule it in the morning and then get your child to school immediately after, if possible. All right? This is important. If you are absent from the school day, then you can't expect to come to an after-school event. So if there is a play happening in the afternoon, if you're absent from the school day because you're sick, then you shouldn't suddenly feel better to come to an event that's happening after school. This is very important. If a student's been absent 15 or more times in the school year, the principal reserves the right to retain the student in that grade. Because if you're absent that many times, you've not mastered all the skills and content of that grade level to be prepared to move to the next grade level. And again, on average, our students are missing 20 days of school. That's a big issue. We will take attendance daily. We will call. Our social workers might make home visits. We will contact and work with the relevant agencies. Our job is to ensure that you are getting your children to school. And we will do our part, so we need you to do your part. So we talked about the time that the school day begins for elementary school, 7:50 a.m. Students are late as of 8:11. For our middle school, doors open at 8:45. Students are late at 9:01. Right? We need our students to get through breakfast, get to their classes on time, because there's a lot to get done. Every 5 tardies will equal to 1 absence. And again, 15 or more absences, the principal reserves the right to retain the student for the school year. So again, not just focus on being here every day, be here on time. We've talked about the first two bullet points. Important note for the elementary schools. If our elementary school students are late, we expect the parents to escort them into the building so that they can check in with the front office. So if you are a parent of a student at Coquillard, Harrison, Warren, or Wilson, if you're dropping off your child after 8:10, you need to park the car, you need to come inside with your student and check them in so that it can get a late pass and get to class. A few reminders. All of our schools are located in neighborhoods. We have to be respectful of our neighbors. Or principals don't want to get phone calls saying your parents are parked in my driveway or things like that. Please obey the speeding limit. We have a lot of students who walk. They have to cross the street. And it's nerve-wracking sometimes watching folks driving by our schools. So please obey the speeding limit. When you are dropping your kiddos off, remember we are in a learning environment. So we really need to be mindful of the types of music that we're playing in our cars and the volume. If you're dropping off your kiddos as there are other children around, and the music is loud and obscene, we respect your right to do that on your time. But when you get on our campus, please turn that kind of music down and be respectful of everyone else. The same is true in terms of what's happening in your cars. Every adult that works in our schools is a mandated reporter. And so when you come to school, you're dropping off your kids or picking up your kids, and there are things happening in your car that shouldn't be happening in your car, our staff will report it. And that could be a number of things. Maybe you're trying to get 7 kids on one back seat. Maybe there are open containers in the car when you drop the kiddos off, or what have you. If we see those things, our staff, by law, are mandated reporters and will report those type of activities. And finally, families, try to be a role model. Our young people are watching. So when you come to drop them off and pick them up, remember that your kiddos are watching. Dismissal. So again, starting December 1st, we dismiss early. For elementary school, that's at 1 p.m. Until then, dismissal is at 3 p.m. Families, you are late at 3:31. Middle school, you are late at 4:31. Please pick up your scholars on time. Pick up your kiddos on time. If you're not picking up your kiddos on time, you will be charged a late fee. Why? Our staff, they have their own kids that they need to get home to. We also pay them for a set number of hours. And so if they need to stay beyond 3:30 to watch your kiddos because you're late to pick them up, then they're not getting home to pick up their own kids or to make dinner for their kids. We love your kids. We enjoy being with them from 7:50 to 3:30. But we all need to get home to our own responsibilities. Many of our staff have second jobs, right? We all know teachers aren't millionaires. And so many of them need to get to their second jobs to sustain themselves. So it's important that you pick your kids up on time so that our staff can get to their other responsibilities. If your child is still here beyond an hour after dismissal, 2 things. 1, we reserve the right to notify Child Protective Services. And 2, we reserve the right to drop your child off at the nearest precinct. I know that sounds harsh, but I have done this work in Georgia, Louisiana, New York, California, so many other places, this is common practice. You have to pick your kids up on time. Our employees are also union contract employees. So again, their hours are set. And if we go outside of that, we have to pay them. And in case you haven't heard, schools are broke. So I don't have a finite budget to just pay people overtime to stay and watch kids because their families are late. I know I'm harping on this, it sounds like I'm nagging, but I am because it's important. The rules in general also apply to our buses. So if kids think that they follow the rules in the building and then they get on the buses and they start acting a fool, the rules still apply. Our buses also have cameras on them. So we are able to see the types of misbehaviors that often occurs. At the elementary level, families are expected to be at the pickup location where their kids are getting dropped off. Otherwise, the bus will take your kid back to school. And then you will be responsible for collecting your student at campus. That's only for elementary. The bus is a privilege. So the school may suspend your child from the bus if families are not picking up their kids on time all the time, or if kiddos are consistently misbehaving on the bus. So when I'm driving around town in the afternoon and I see kiddos sticking their arms out the window or being inappropriate, walking up and down the bus, jumping in the seats, that's distracting to the bus driver. And if the bus driver has to pull over and stop the bus to correct behavior, now the entire route is late. So we need to follow the rules on the bus. So the next thing we talked about was learning in general. And a part of that is homework. We give homework here at the zone schools. I know that might not always be the case, but we give homework. All right? And this is the expectation for what homework will look like on a daily basis. So whether you're in kindergarten or 8th grade, homework should be expected. And at the kindergarten level, we're looking at about 50 minutes of homework each day. If you're in 8th grade, you should be prepared for about 110 minutes to 120 minutes of homework every single day. Because when you get to high school, it's going to be more rigorous. All right, so everything that we're doing is preparing you for what's to come next. We also encourage our students to read each night for at least 20 minutes, whatever of your choice. So it's comic books, graphic novels, students should be reading on a daily basis to build their fluency and build their vocabulary. All right, so next I want to talk about student code of conduct, rights, and responsibilities. I want to start off by saying we have exceptionally high expectations for student behavior because we believe that these standards create safe, positive, productive learning environments. All right? And it starts with the expectations. From attendance, to how we show up, to the way we speak, all of that starts with very high expectations. Our teachers use a variety of strategies to create a joyous, warm, but clearly defined, productive learning environment. And we use a variety of tools like advisory, counseling, restorative practices, etc., to ensure that students have some agency and they get a varied learning environment. As a starting point, we expect all students to be respectful and courteous towards each other and to the adults in the building. Whether that's the principal, the teacher, or the custodian, you are respectful to all adults in our buildings. This has happened and been going on for quite some time, but I want to be clear. No one student will be allowed to disrupt the learning of all other students. If you're not there to learn, then that's fine, but you can't disrupt the learning for everyone else. And we will handle that. We will enforce these expectations vigorously and consistently because it's what's best for all students. It's just that simple. And finally, we use a progressive discipline policy to address student behavior based on the type of behavior that it is. Our behavior strategy, it is logical and evidence-based. So the strategies that we use, there's research to support it, and it's logical. We focus on reflective and restoration as opposed to being punitive, right? It's age and developmentally appropriate, and our expectations are both school-wide and in the classroom. So we know sometimes there is, I'm only going to behave in this class because I like this teacher, or this teacher, doesn't mess around, but then I go to the next class and I act a fool. Or I behave in class, but then the minute I have to get in the hallway, then no rules exist and start acting a fool. Or we act a fool on the playground, or we act a fool in the lunchroom. There are rules everywhere, and that's to ensure that everyone is safe. I'm not going to go through each of these. A lot of these families are common sense. Insubordination, theft, fighting or acts of violence, vandalism. And on vandalism, I want to be clear, that includes our technology. We allocate a lot of resources to make sure that students can have, we allocate a lot of financial resources to make sure that students can have the material resources they need, such as laptops. But some of our students, they just pick the keys off the keyboard because they're bored. So now what are you going to use in class? We can't just keep replacing laptops. Disrespectful language, we already talked about that. Threats, intimidation. We have a number of students who just think they can threaten each other and threaten our staff. That's a problem. Bullying, I hear about this all the time. I have zero tolerance for bullying of any kind, which includes cyberbullying. Prohibited and illegal substances. It's happening. We have students who are bringing things to our school buildings that have no place, including illegal substances. And vapes. I'm not sure why middle or elementary school students would be vaping, but they bring them to our buildings. How are they getting access to these things? They don't belong in our school buildings. Weapons do not belong in our school buildings. Anything that's flammable, lighters, etc., do not belong in our school buildings. We have a number of interventions. We use behavior multi-tiered systems of support, which is 3 tiers. And so again, we use social emotional learning, character education, restorative practices, counseling, parent conferences, etc., to try to intervene before behaviors escalate. But there are times when interventions don't work. And so then we have to issue consequences. And there's a variety of consequences that we use, again, based on what the various incidents are. It could also include asking a family to come up and spend the day shadowing their student. So you can see what your child is doing from class to class every single day and see for yourself. We never want to get to the last 3. I want to be clear, I am in general and philosophically not a fan of expulsion. Right? But there are times where it is the only recourse. And so, not because philosophically I don't support it doesn't mean that I won't implement it. Because if that's what's best for the wider school community, I absolutely will. Because no one student will be allowed to disrupt the learning of all other students, which is happening a lot right now. Some type of behaviors will almost automatically result in a suspension. And these are a few examples: bullying, fighting, possession of tobacco, alcohol, illegal and controlled substances. Can always guarantee that if it's here, it's almost going to result in a suspension. And possession of a firearm or destructive weapon will always result in an expulsion. There is no negotiating this one. We try to provide some guidelines that we believe if your students just come to school ready to learn, interact positively, they're studently at all times, and engage with their best effort, they do these 4 things, they'll find success here across the zone schools. So next we talked about students are not showing up engaged or ready for learning, and a lot of that starts with how they present themselves. A dress code. The fact is, families, if I showed up today as the zone chief in some sweatpants and a t-shirt, you all wouldn't take me seriously. Dress codes are a part of life. Or police officers wear uniform, or nurses wear uniforms, or postal service folks wear uniforms. Many professions wear uniforms. At work, we have dress code at work. Now, in the coming days, we will share with you lots of student interviews that talk about the bullying that's occurring in our buildings because of what students may or may not have access in terms of what they're wearing. It's an issue across our schools. And so that's the reason that we are moving to a uniform. The uniform will take effect January 9th, right? And we will be providing all families with 2 vouchers to get their uniforms. I know this is a big shift, so families on a needs basis might get more than 2 vouchers, and that will occur at the individual school level. Until then, we have a dress code, and that took effect today. So on the head, no hats, no hoods, no do-rags, no bonnets, etc. Shirts should have sleeves and cover the torso. Your bottoms, no rips, no holes. No shorter than 2 inches above the knee. Feet, closed-toed shoes. That's a safety issue. That's a safety issue. Bags, clear or transparent bags. And a lot of that goes back to what we talked about earlier with students bringing items into our buildings that have no place in a school building. Now, I recognize that for some students, they will need to have small pouches for medical products. That's acceptable. So if you have a small pouch for medical products, and things of that nature, you can bring that within your clear backpack. Parent engagement. It's the last item I talked about in terms of what's not working. So, as I talked about earlier, we have very high expectations. But in order for us to meet those expectations, it requires a partnership with our families. And we need to make that more robust. So we will do our part by communicating regularly with our families. And I recognize we don't do that well all the time or consistently, but it's a priority of mine. And our schools know that. But a part of the reason that you don't hear from us all the time, because families, you need to let us know if there's an update to your contact information. Too often we mail things home, it comes back undelivered. We call a phone number, we get a restaurant. So we can't get in touch with you. And the same is true for your emergency contacts. If your emergency contacts change, you need to let us know, because if we can't reach you, right, we're going to go through your emergency contact list. And this often happens, like one perfect example, child needs to go to a hospital. We call 911, the ambulance gets here, want to take your child to the hospital. We want to get your permission, because that's going to be a cost to you. But if we call you and you don't answer, we go through your emergency contact, and we don't get anyone, all the numbers are wrong, at that point we're going to make the decision and your child is going to go in that ambulance and you're going to get that cost. So please, if you update your contact information, if it changes, please let the school know. We always want families to be here, to be present. You are welcome to come to our buildings for a number of reasons. Whether you want to volunteer, see what your kids are doing, you're welcome. We just ask that you provide a 24-hour notice to your school prior to visiting. Of course, you will have to check in with the front desk, wear a visitor pass, and then you'll have access to the building. So these are some family engagement opportunities throughout the course of the year. Curriculum night, this is an opportunity for families to learn about how to support their kiddos with the learning that's happening, so they learn about the curricula that we use. And teachers will provide them with strategies to use at home to reinforce learning. Parent-teacher conferences, this just happened last Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. I was at Navarre. Excellent turnout. Parent-teacher conferences at Navarre. Parent advisory councils. So each school is looking to develop a parent advisory council. Right? More information about this is underway. Booster clubs. So our middle school team already has an athletic program. We are in the process of rolling out athletics in our elementary schools. So I think we are starting with soccer, track, and basketball at the elementary schools. And I think cheerleading as well at our elementary schools. And so parents, we could use your assistance via a booster club to help support these athletic programs. Our schools are also in the process of creating a dedicated parent resource center in each of our buildings. That will be a space for parents to come in. They can get access to a variety of resources, including technology. And then we also need parent volunteers. Ideally, I would love all of our families to volunteer at least 10 hours per year. And volunteer could also mean a donation. Volunteer could mean I'm going on a field trip as a chaperone. I'm a classroom parent. The fall festival is coming up, and I'm going to help decorate. That was just an example, Bob. You didn't miss an event. That was just an example. We had trunk or treat at some of our schools, and lots of parents, I was at Wilson, lots of parents showed up, decorated their booths, and passed out candy. That's great opportunities to volunteer. We also want to be very clear that that includes all family members. So mom, dad, you can't come, but uncle or grandma or big brother or big sister can come. Someone from the family, volunteer. We need your help. Everything that I talked about today, we cannot do without your help or your support. Now I know, I don't know how this happened, but over time, it somehow became acceptable, or we accepted the idea that parents just need to drop their kids off and the school will do the rest. And don't ask any questions, don't come here unless we call you, don't call us unless we call you. drop the kids off, we'll do the rest. No. As families, you are a valuable resource. So we want you on the parent advisory councils. We want you to take advantage of the parent resource centers. We want you to volunteer. And so with that, we're looking forward to partnering with you. Thank you. And I will take any questions. Ms. Miller, I'm not sure if there are questions online. I'm happy to address them. While you're looking there, any questions in the room?
I have lots, but I know the time is limited.
Sure.
I don't even know where to start. The first thing I would like to ask is, why wait until school has already been on its way to implement different things like the dress code? I'm all for dress code, just not uniform. As far as, just waiting now, with everything that's going on, parents have already put money aside for the things they need to put it aside for. Now the holidays is coming, and then we're only giving 2 vouchers for uniform. So why the wait?
So that was not intentional. So since I have been here, my number one regret is that I wasn't hired back in June to have the time over the summer to plan some of these things so that we could start fresh in August. That's just a reality. When I got here, I was under the impression that things were in a different place than where they are now, and so a lot of big changes would not be required moving forward, but that was not the case. And so when I got here, met with our teams, saw what was happening in our schools, the thought and the decision was we needed to do some things now and not wait till next year. And I say that to say there were a lot of other things that we wanted to change, but we wanted to be mindful with doing too much too soon, and so some of those other changes will occur next year.
It is understood that this is a lot of transition for
I understand.
families, for students.
Yes.
That is understood.
Yes.
But it is still moving forward. Yet it's still moving forward. This is what we're doing.
Yes.
Even though it is a lot for.
I understand that, and we will definitely try our best to be flexible and work with families and students during this transition. But so I don't think we've met before.
We have.
Oh, we have? Okay.
At Harrison briefly.
Okay, all right. So one of the things, and I'm sorry for the families that are online, I was out of screen. No, you're fine. So one of the things families will get to know about me, they may or may not appreciate it, I'm super transparent. Sometimes it's my own fault. And I'll be transparent and say that there's just not a lot of learning happening in our buildings right now. There just isn't. The state results from last year tell us that that was not the case. There were some gains. I don't want to discredit what was done in previous years, but it's not what it needed to be. And I will tell you so far this year, it's not what any of us would like it to be. Not what our teachers would like it to be, not what our principals would like it to be, not what any of us at the district level would like it to be. And what I know to be true is that it all starts with what we expect. And so that's where we're starting, with expectations in terms of what's acceptable in behavior, expectations in terms of how our students show up and present themselves, expectations for how we speak to each other. It all starts with expectations. And believe you me, I recognize that it is inconvenient to do these things in the middle of the year, but I had a decision to make. Do I go through the rest of this year with the way things are? And again, there's not a lot of learning happening in our buildings with the way things are. So for me, it would be a wasted year. And I think for many of our educators would agree it's a wasted year. Or do we try to make some big changes now to get some learning out of this year? There's a reason that a lot of folks aren't raising their hands to be teachers anymore. Folks don't want to work with kids right now for a number of reasons, primarily behavior. And so when we have young people trying to hit teachers, when we have young people cursing at teachers who are just trying to do their job and teach them, all of these things are unacceptable. And now for some people that are going to say, well, these things are unrelated. My experience and from the research, these things are not unrelated. It's all a part of the culture we are trying to create. And a culture of learning starts with these high expectations, including how we present ourselves. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of a backpack, the clear backpacks. I'm not. But my alternative are metal detectors. I don't want to go that route. I'm just being honest with folks. I've worked in schools where you go through metal detectors. Chicago, New York, LA. I don't like them. I don't like them for kids. But or young people think it's okay to bring knives into the building or marijuana into the building and smoke in the bathroom, which then sets off a fire alarm, which then disrupts classes for the next 2 hours, how do I solve these things? So, I get it.
My thing for it, as far as like the clear backpack, and I'm sorry if I'm taking up anybody else's time, but I just have a lot to say, a lot of concern.
And I will answer every single one of them.
It is not going to stop the children from bringing in anything. Metal detectors, yes, but again, for me, this whole thing is like institutionalizing them.
Okay.
They already don't get to go outside. They don't have a lot of free time. It's 20 minutes to eat, that's institution. 3-4 minutes to get where you have to go, that's institution. Everybody looking the same, wearing the same thing, you don't get to be an individual, that's institution. So for me, the clear backpack, you're gonna find a way to bring it in on your person. So if, I'm not shifting the blame to teachers, but I spent a lot of time at Navarre last year, as well as this year. And you have to recognize where you are to find a solution to this whole blanket system thing. I don't agree with. I believe we should look at the children who are causing the problems and go about it that way instead of punishing everybody, and everybody has to do the same thing because we have 15 or 20 kids in this grade, 15 or 20 in that grade that don't want to do what's required of them. Again, I do believe that there should be a strict dress code. Boots not being able to be worn besides in the gym class or when they have recess. They don't have recess. Wintertime is for boots. So I have to have my child go outside in 6 feet of snow in her boots, and then have a change of shoes when she gets inside of the school. That's a bit much. I mean, like I said, I have a lot here, but I'm just trying to understand this whole blanket system where we're gonna make it for everybody instead of targeting the ones who are actually the problem. Because not all the kids are the same. And no, there is not a lot of learning being done in the classroom. It's because some teachers are scared. Some teachers don't want to stand up and say what needs to be said to the children. So they let one child, again, I spend a lot of time there, disrupt the classroom. That's not fair to the kids that are trying to learn.
All excellent points. As far as I know, I definitely know that each of our elementary schools have recess. I need to look at the Navarre schedule, but one of the things, but one of the things that we did ask our principals to do as a part of the Q2 reset was to make modifications to their schedule to build in enrichment, clubs, things of that nature. So that is rolling out this year. So we did change the schedule for Q2 because I did have some problems with the way our schedules were structured, and it did not allow for a lot of student choice or a lot of student agency. So hopefully that will be addressed in that way. I hear you. I want to say a couple of things. One, I don't think that, as is always the case, that we are going to be 100% in alignment on everything. And I'm okay with that, right? I certainly respect and encourage what you're doing. You're a parent. It is your job to advocate for your child, and I respect any parent that does that, especially when they do it in the manner in which that you're doing it, and we're having a healthy dialogue. But I also want to be clear that I expect that at the end of all of this, we may or may not 100% agree on how we move forward. And I get that, and please continue to push my thinking, and we'll continue to have dialogue. I would say I don't think it's a fair statement to say that it's 15 or 20 students per grade level, which, by the way, even if it's 15 to 20 students per grade level, that's still too many, right? Because when you have a grade level with 100 kids and 20% aren't doing the right thing, that's what? That's 20% of the grade, right? And yes, I hear you. We have some, and there's fault to go all around, right? But I think the fair question there, to your point around teachers, is what would be happening in our buildings for teachers to even be afraid of children? I know I'm not. If you are 18 or under, you are a child to me, and you will be a child to me, to be clear. I don't care if you're 6'2" or what, you're a child.
The reason I said that, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, you're fine.
I said that is because, again, I spend a lot of time there
Mhm.
this year. I'm a coach this year, so I spend a lot of time talking to these children.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk, they listen. So why are you standing outside of the classroom? Why can't you do what you're told to do here? Because if you can't do it here.
What do you do?
Say it again.
What do you do?
I'm a coach.
Do you want a job?
Doing,
Working at one of our schools full time.
if I don't have to be in the classroom full time, yes, I would like to move around.
That's the, I'm not trying to single you out,
Yeah.
but that's the thing right there.
And,
Trying to get people to work in our schools in the current environments, in our classrooms. Thank you, Dada, for saying classroom. In our classrooms is a challenge. And so we're throwing money at teachers, they're still not coming. And you can push me, I don't disagree with anything that you're saying, but I also want to share with you what's on the other side of that.
I'm just trying to understand, like, why, if I say something to any of boys, girls, Mexican, black, white, they hear me.
Mhm.
When I say, have a seat and don't be a distraction, stop doing what you're doing, or do you want me to walk you to the office? Like, why do they hear me and they don't hear their teachers?
There's a number of reasons for that. And for the purpose of time, I'm not going to go through each reason. Some of that is racial, some of that is tone. As an example, when I was a teacher in New York, I would like say little boy, little girl. The kids found that endearing, parents didn't care. Some of my counterparts did it, didn't go over well, right? I can say from how you are interacting with me, I completely understand why they would respond to you, right? And so, we'd like to think that all teachers have the same ability, the same experience, same skill set. We have some teachers that they just have that magic skill and they're able to connect with students. We have some teachers that are experts in their content areas, but the relational part of the job is something that they need work on. And we do identify that, and we do try to provide professional development. That, by the way, is the driving reason behind the weekly early dismissal that will begin in December, so that we can have weekly professional development for teachers. It's not so that everyone can go home early, but right now we have 1 day of professional development in August before the start of the school year, and then we have teachers can only meet every other week for 90 minutes, and there's only so much you can do. So that's a big part of the reason that we're moving to weekly early dismissal, is that we can have professional development to talk about how do you create a better relationships with students, parents, build great classroom culture so that students do respond to you, right? That's the driving force behind that decision. But I say that to say, like, again, I don't disagree with your point. Different students respond to different adults. I walk into the building, there are students who respond to me that don't respond to some of the adults that they see every single day, and they only see me probably once or twice a week. Some of it is, and I know from a lot of our young men, they run up They want to know my suit size and where I got my tie. Can I show them how to tie a bow tie? And some of it is like how I present myself. I have a funny accent. And so there are different ways that I take to my advantage to connect and build relationship with students. For some of our adults, that is something that they have to work on. And we assume that because they're teachers and they have certification and they have multiple degrees, that building relationships with students and managing a classroom comes naturally.
But this is something that they had to do in order to get this job, is to show how they would redirect things and make sure everyone is on the same level, no?
No,
Oh, wow.
no, not necessarily.
My apologies.
I would also say, right, I would also say that, and we're making a lot of assumptions here, including myself, right? I think until you've been in a class with 24 students, I think it's easy to say if one person is causing a disruption, we can just isolate that and deal with the other 23, but it's not as easy as it sounds, especially if that young person decides to throw the chair across the classroom, right? Yeah, some of our teachers are potentially afraid, sometimes rightfully so. And so then how do we solve that problem? Because nationally, the system is on the brink of collapse. People don't want to teach anymore. And when you talk to people who leave the profession, it's largely, top reasons are salary, lack of flexibility, I don't get respected by the students or the parents, I'm tired of the abuse, long hours, or some variation of that, right? I'm not discrediting any of the other things that you're mentioning, but when we talk to our teachers, when we look at the exit survey data from last year, when we talk to teachers who've already left this year, and the school year just started, 3 months ago, we already have folks that have left. They talk about, I'm tired of the way the kids are behaving, they're not listening, I'm tired of the disrespect, I'm tired of students feeling like they can cuss at me, they can fight me, and again, I know we'd like to think it's just 1 or 2 per class or per grade level. Some of these things are systemic. And so it requires a systemic approach. And I know that it feels harsh. I get that. I am not discounting any of the things that you've shared. But when I speak to each of our school teams or teachers, and we talk about what's happening in our buildings, there are things that we agree on. We don't agree on a lot of things, but we agree on what we've been doing isn't working. We agree that what's happening right now isn't working. We agree that we need to fix things. Where we then kind of disagree is, what do we do next? And so I ask staff, as I will ask parents, if you have a better idea, I'm all ears. I really am. I don't want to make these changes. And I started and I took the job. I didn't think I would have to come and make these changes. But when I walk around the building and seeing when one student decides to elope and run around, it isn't one person that's chasing that student. It's multiple. Then what else has to happen? The building needs to go on a lockdown. So when you hear lockdown, kids are not learning anymore because they hear lockdown. What's happening? Now they have anxiety. Is there an intruder on campus? Whatever. They just hear lockdown. So everyone, teachers need to stop, run to their doors, lock their doors. Do you have 4 or 5 adults running around chasing one kid? Kid pushes the door, I will tell you, I've never seen so many doors in a school building in my life since I moved to Indiana, right? For better or worse. But in other places, you have 3 sets of doors, 4 sets of doors. In this one building, there's like 20-something doors. Kid pushes the door, run out. They run out of this building. The main road is right there. You have 5, 6 adults chasing one kid. That disrupts everything for the day. This is just what happens. And so I think it is, I think we want the solution to be just isolate these 1 or 2 kids. But A, I haven't seen that to be the case, because even when, and there are some people that say, well, let's just expel these 1 or 2 kids. Again, I'm not a big proponent of expulsion, because where do these kids go? And I do not believe in throwing our young people to the streets. Because when we expel them from Navarre, or we expel them from our school, any of our schools, where do they go? Right? So I will try to do every single thing that I can to make it work for everybody. Now, there comes a point where it can't work for everybody, and then we have to go that route. But if we were to expel everybody, we wouldn't have a lot of kids.
Expulsion, out of school suspension, any of that stuff is good because a lot of these kids want to sit home. They want to be at home doing nothing, which is why last year I was just such an advocate of give them something else to do. The school needs to be clean. We're gonna walk around here and wipe walls or do something else as your discipline or something other than sitting them at home because they're missing out on that learning time and all of that.
I don't disagree with you on that. But then you'll have the parent that says, I send my child to school to learn, not to be a janitor, and here's my lawyer, and I'm suing. And then on the opposite side of that, we had a parent who actually at just this school, a month or so ago, said, don't call me, y'all are teachers, beat him. And we're like, corporal punishment's been outlawed for how long? And like, he was mad that we call him to parent his child, right? And so now we get into like, we have to have an individualized answer for every single one, and we can't run schools that way.
So where is the rewarding stuff? Everything, the behavioral problems have to be talked about, they have to
Yes.
be addressed.
That was the focus of today. And our team did think about like, should we talk about today some of the positive changes, like the schedule changes to include in the day, not after school, but clubs and enrichment, that, student leadership opportunities, all of these things. We went back and forth, and where we landed as a leadership team was, we didn't want to take away from the seriousness of this conversation. And so that's why we decided not to talk about some of the more positive changes that we are unveiling. But there are some. All right, and I hear you. We went back and forth, we went back and forth on that.
Okay, one last question.
Yes.
So jewelry is not accepted at the school, I'm.
Students can wear jewelry as long as it is not excessive. All right, something that happens in my experience, jewelry often becomes weapons, especially rings, when there's a fight. And, the difference between bare knuckles versus a fist with a ring, the other thing, personally, the other reason I don't like jewelry is because when they go missing, then the parent is like, it happened at school, the school needs to replace it. And it's like, we get into that all the time. I'm dealing with that with some very fancy glasses right now, where the child lost the glasses and the parent feels like the school is responsible, and it's just kind of like, so students can wear jewelry, not excessive, all right? We have some questions online or comments?
Yes, there are several comments online.
Yes,
One is by, I lost her name, but she said that we need to address the mental health.
yes.
issues. So I said you can speak to that.
Yes, so let me talk about mental health. So earlier I spoke about our Executive Director of Student Service, Ms. Marissa Davis, and one of her first hires was a Director of Student Wellness, which includes social and emotional mental health. So we will be including mindfulness practices in the school day. We will have meditation moments during the school day. We're rolling out character education during the school day and social emotional learning. So we do plan to address that in the short time she's been here. She's also increased a number of partnerships. Beacon, Oaklawn, am I making up Oaklawn? No. And she's Bowen and a few other partnerships as well to provide wraparound services, including mental health and emotional support for our young people. So that is something that we are absolutely aware of. The next step is providing that support for our staff as well.
And then somebody else commented and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, some of the kids are saying that some of the
That's true too. Different folks leave for different reasons. So, my earlier comment was not a one-size-fit-all. Again, when you look at, and I think I did say the lack of respect, the deprofessionalization of teachers, what's the adage? Those who know do, those who can't teach. We don't respect teachers the way that we used to. And that's students, that's parents, that's administrators too. I would like to think that my administrators do not fall in that category. But if it is something that is an area of improvement for us, we will absolutely tackle that. I expect everyone to be respected in their roles and to be treated like the professionals that they are. I love the online questions and comments. Keep them coming.
Tanya Winston shares that these children are dealing with trauma and are starving from love and attention.
I do not disagree with that. And one of the things that we talked about as a leadership team was really moving towards trauma-informed practices. We haven't rolled that out in a cohesive way, but we've taken some steps. As I mentioned, mindfulness, meditation, restorative practices is something that we're looking to roll out in a real meaningful way. So we're looking at trying to find the right resources to make sure that our folks are getting the right training for trauma-informed practices. Now, I know as in all things education, every 2 years, there are these fads and buzzwords, and there's a lot of people right now who think that they're experts in trauma-informed practices and that they're doing trauma-informed practices. They're not, but that is something that we do want to tackle. I do not disagree, in particular for our community, Black and brown folks, poor folks, years upon years of trauma. COVID impacted our communities disproportionately. That's additional trauma. The world shut down. Many of their families, many of our families in our communities lost businesses, lost jobs, additional trauma. I hear all of that. And so this is something that we are trying to do. But it's interesting, right, that we talk about all of these things. One of the things you hear from teachers as well, which you didn't necessarily hear a decade or two ago, is we're being expected to do too much. We are teachers. Now I got to be counselor and social worker and pastor and all of these things. So the job has also become more demanding and more stressful. So when you put on top of that disrespect at all levels and feeling that you are not valued as a professional, there's only but so much you can take. And I'm telling you, we are fortunate right now that we don't have as many vacancies as some of our counterparts, but I am really concerned about next year if we keep on the same trajectory. I really am. And we can't have it both ways, right? Because then it's, well, can't you just hire people? And then we get, negative, or we get criticism for, well, all your people have emergency permits and they're not fully qualified. Like, we can't have it both ways. Like, all the experienced, great teachers that you had, that I had, that we would want for our own kids, they're leaving the profession for these reasons. And then we have to, bring in folks with less experience, less credentials. Then you complain. And I don't mean you as in you all that are here, but then there's complaints that, we don't have highly qualified folks. So we can't have it both ways. We're doing the best we can to make sure that we have the best possible adults in front of your children. But I want us to also understand that there are myriads of factors that's impacting our abilities to do that. Some of that is the culture of our buildings. Do we have more comments or questions online?
Sarah mentioned it's not the kids. Parents have to be made accountable for how the children are at school. Distractions, habits, health, hygiene, and respect.
I agree with Ms. Sarah, thank you. And that's why I talked about the parent piece, what we expect from parents, what we want from parents. Parents, you cannot give up your role in this process. You play an important part in your child's educational journey. And so again, you can't just say, I drop my kids off at 7:50, I ain't gotta worry about them until 3 o'clock. No, you play a part in this process. From making sure when they leave the house in the morning that they're dressed appropriately, making sure when they leave the house, they're not leaving and they have knives or marijuana in their backpacks. I don't know about you all, but when I was in school, my mom checked my backpack.
But a lot of the parents are not there when the children go to school.
That too. So then, because we do have some kids that are raising themselves. So how do we solve for that? It's a myriad of issues. It's a myriad of issues. And I will tell you as well, social workers are hard to find. School psychologists are hard to find. Counselors are hard to find. We extended an offer to a psychologist recently, part-time. And Ms. Zapata told me just today that she withdrew from the role. So, we're trying to find someone else. So for various reasons, but this is what schools have to do. We have to respond to all of the needs of all families. I have, in the course of my career, paid rent for parents, have to take food to people's houses. Like, this is what the job requires now. Some people sign up for it. Some people think it's beyond the scope of their work as teachers or as educators. So we have to respond to all of these things, but that's also a part of the reason. So again, when the job has become that big and that demanding, the least you expect is that when you come to work, you're not disrespected. And right now, unfortunately, the culture of our schools, for whatever reasons, and again, I'm not just putting this on our kiddos, because we also have a lot of great kids that want to learn, that are very frustrated with their classmates, and that are very frustrated with the way things are. I was talking to some kids at Navarre just Friday, and there were kids that were saying, we have teachers that after the kids disrespect them, they shut down for the rest of the class. They just don't want to do it anymore because, when you have a kid, calling you out your name and talking about your mama, the teachers just sit down. They don't want to do anything else for the rest of the period. And so then they don't learn. And so for them, it's just kind of like, so I don't get anything done for the day. And I just wasted my class. That's what the kids are saying. So, again, I don't want to, do we have some challenges? Yes. But I also believe that we have all the ingredients to do some amazing things. I just think we need to raise our expectations and all be clear on what it is that we're working towards and then move in the same direction. We have a lot of great kids and we have a lot of great families that are doing what they're supposed to do. We have some young people that they don't have that fortune because of circumstances beyond their control. But we can't just abandon them either. Anything else online before? Yes, ma'am.
First of all, my name is Dr. Janet Evelyn.
Hi, Dr. Evelyn.
The name rings a bell.
It does.
Thank you. Outstanding presentation.
Thank you.
As an educator, I wish you luck.
Thank you.
And that's because of my experience.
Mm-hmm.
My former colleague here, and if I can use the term that the students use, my girl here, I was at Navarre, and also my colleague over there.
Yeah.
I was pulled out of Navarre by edu staff. Because I go as a.
Sub? As a sub?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a big part of the issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, you're only a sub. F you. You know that. The number of times I've been, like my mother would say, called out of my name.
Yeah.
One day, this student fighting a girl, 6th grader, because he's telling the class, don't talk to her, because she has herpes. So she went after him. So I'm grabbing her and going like this. I got punched in my back from him 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay? That was only one of the issues. Several other issues. But 2 in particular, again, and it's not only me. They absolutely do not respect. You're only a sub, you can't tell me what.
Yep.
I personally do not use the term sub. I say, I'm a guest teacher who chooses to come here today.
Yep.
challenge, but I'm suggesting to you, please, that you add that to the list of.
Sure.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Because the system is breaking down.
Yes.
And I try to tell my students, my phone goes off 5:30 every morning, although I'm at Washington, right? But there are different issues there. And that's begging us to go somewhere. Almost every Friday, there are over 100, and I'm not exaggerating.
Yes. No, you're not.
Okay. Over 100 full-time faculty, full-time teachers that are absent. One or two schools I've heard have had to close down and take all the students in the gym because there are no full-time teachers, there aren't enough subs. That's a very big issue. I hate to say, but I suggest that you add to your list.
Yeah. So add that to the ever-growing list. So first of all, thank you for being here, and I am so disappointed and saddened to hear that you were assaulted while working at one of our schools. With at the expense of aging you, and I would dare not do that. But you know, if nothing else, right? Even as an adult today, there's a certain reverence and a certain level of respect that you give to an elder in the community. And so the fact that a sixth grader would assault you as an elder is, to me, mind-blowing. But I'm glad you're sharing that experience. I'm sorry that it happened to you, but I'm glad you're sharing that. I will say there's a shortage of substitutes. People don't want to sub in buildings either. And that's a problem. And you talked about, all the folks who call out. It does. We've not had at any of our schools one day thus far where every single teacher has reported to work. Morale is low because of the culture and environment of our buildings, among other reasons. But I'm telling you, it's not just pay. Because as you know, the zone being separate from the district last year, we were paying our teachers higher than the district, and we gave sign-in bonuses and retention bonuses, and still so many teachers left. And so when you talk to folks, they're like, it's not just about the money. Yes, we don't feel respected by our administrators and things like that, but a big part of it is it's too much. I get disrespected. I gotta be psychologist, mommy, daddy, therapist, and teacher. I spend 90% of my class correcting behavior. I'm afraid for my physical safety. So they quit. And then we don't have subs. We don't have enough subs. Again, and for everyone, folks online, like the individual you just heard from, Dr. Elvin, like I'm not paying her to be here and say that she got assaulted while working in our building.
And to be honest with you, let me just demonstrate. Like, he did not really set out to hit me.
But you got hit.
As I have her, right, and she's much bigger than him, and moving, instead of him running, he's coming around me. So when
Right.
I move,
Because you weren't going to get in between him and trying to fight the other student.
Yeah, she would have beat him up. He's like this,
Right.
and she's like this.
Yeah.
And then added to that, which of course.
So what did you accomplish for the rest of your class period after that? Were you able to accomplish anything else?
Of course not, because security has to come and.
It shuts down the whole class.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So then there's no learn. That's a wasted class period.
Absolutely.
That's what that it happens. It's not as uncommon as we would like to think. And again, to the folks out there that are online, like I didn't pay her to come here and share this to support the things that I'm saying. She just happens to be here and is sharing an experience. Again, I don't want to be dramatic and make it sound like, or buildings are a war zone. They are not, right? They're not a war zone. But they're in a condition right now that is not conducive to great teaching and learning.
Absolutely.
And we need to change that condition, and that's why we're doing this reset, and it all starts with expectations. What we expect of ourselves as adults responsible for children, what we expect from the kids, and what we expect from the parents. So yeah, I agree that some of our parents need to do their part. But again, some of our children, they don't have the luxury of that. Some of our children are raising themselves. And so we need to step in and be there for them even more. But it all starts with what we expect.
And one last thing.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
did not mention the phone. The phones, which again, all over is an issue. So somewhere along the line,
Mhm.
I hope that that becomes part of the plan.
Sure.
Like you mentioned New York.
Mhm.
I know in the Bronx, where my niece and nephew attend, that when you go in at mornings, you have your own little cage.
Yeah.
To put your phone in. Yep, your parent
Yeah.
needs you, they go back to the old style, call the office.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been in schools where you have, when you get in the morning, you have to
Yes.
check in your phone, and then you don't get your phone back until the end of the day. The phone is a tricky situation, because I've also seen in schools where students are able to use their phone for instructional purposes. They can, especially in schools that don't have Chromebooks or one-to-one. So we are fortunate for now to be able to provide everyone with a laptop. But I want to be clear that if our kids keep damaging it because they don't care, you know, when I walk around and I see laptops on the floor being used as doorstops because they don't care, because they don't know the value of things, they don't care, then yeah, you know, you don't have a choice but to use your phone. So it's a tricky thing. I've seen schools that students use their phones and they do it great, and it's not a distraction, and it's an instructional tool. I've been in schools where the minute you walk in, you gotta check your phone in, and you don't get it back until the end of the day. And if you need to call home in the day, or if your parent needs to reach you, you gotta go through the main office.
The
So,
phone has its advantages.
It
and
does.
disadvantages, because I know for a fact, in some schools, this is where the fight starts.
you're absolutely right, and a lot of issues, fighting, starts with online bullying, and it starts with what students say to each other in various online platforms. You know, we do have strategies for that. We're trying to, you know, but there's only so much that we can do, and we can't be at all places at all times. I will tell you that there are some students, because they know we are watching what's happening in the buildings, they wait until they leave the buildings, and then it goes down in the bus. Or I'm going to meet you across the street in the parking lot of Popeyes or wherever, and that's where it happens. I've heard, you know, about at least in one incident where a group of students showed up at another student apartment because their apartment complexes were walking distance to each other. And so they waited until end of the day, the young man was home, and a group of students went over to that apartment complex to confront the student. Our kids are dealing with a lot of real life stuff that they shouldn't have to deal with. But my job is to try to keep everyone safe, because my teachers, my adults, they need to get home to their own families. I have to keep them safe. And I need to make sure that they want to show up to work. Because again, we are fortunate, knock on wood, that we don't have a lot of vacancies, but there is not one single day that I'm not worried that we're gonna lose more people. And then what happens? Do I start combining classes and suddenly we go from 20 kids in a class to 30? Because again, they're not just teachers raising their hands. A lot of universities have canceled their education departments. A lot of universities have gotten rid of education as a major and gotten rid of their education departments, because people aren't enrolling in college to pursue education as a profession. And it's now starting to happen with administrators. Nationally, this is the largest vacancy of superintendents right now in the country, and principals as well. So people just don't want to work in education as much anymore. A lot of that salary, long hours, I get all of that. But when you talk to a lot of folks, they will also tell you about the culture in school buildings and the culture of education altogether. And I know right now that there are folks who can hear the sound of my voice, in person and online, who one more thing happened and they're gone. I know that. And I am trying my best. Whenever I walk in the building, hey, just hang on, I need you. And I try my best to make sure that they feel respected and appreciated. But, you know, then I get a phone call about some foolishness and I gotta walk them off the ledge because they're thinking about quitting. Teachers aren't growing on trees, folks. Anything else online?
Yes, so Tanya is excited and eager to come to the meeting on Thursday, but she says the main problem is having consistency with everyone.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are traumatized every time there's a new staff every 6 months.
Yep.
And she also mentioned that, with the clear backpack, she's not in favor of those because female issues
Yep.
need to be broadcast and homeless children.
Yep.
Don't have their private belongings exposed.
Yep. Great, all great points. So yeah, I agree with you. You know, staff turnover, Ms. Tanya, is a problem, and that's why we're trying to address some of the culture issues so that folks will want to work in our schools, because it is traumatizing, you know, the minute you develop a relationship with an adult, right, and then they're gone. And now you got to start all over with another adult. You know, in Georgia, my last set of schools that I left, I retained 96% of my staff across my schools. So I'm not used to retaining only 60% of staff. That challenging for me. So, you know, for next year, at the end of this school year, I would like to at minimum retain 70% of staff. And that's still low, but again, from last year to this year, it was 60%. So if I retain from this year to next year 70, it's an improvement. Right now, I'm worried about that, meeting that goal, based on some of what I'm hearing from teachers. Clear backpacks, I said this earlier, but yes, students, not just our young ladies, but students in general, will be allowed to carry pouches that can conceal medical devices or any kind of personal needs. And then as it relates to students who are transient, homeless, I'd be curious and eager to hear more about how that might impact that, and then come up with a solution to that. So if she wants to send me an email, D. Lewis, you can give her my email. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how she thinks that might be a challenge so that we can problem solve that. Any other comments or questions online? Well, I'm definitely happy that there is some engagement. I saw Ms. Tanya also said agreed facts. I'm not sure what that's in reference to. Are we gonna have a cutoff time for transportation change? Yes. Transportation change ends an hour before dismissal. So if dismissal is 3 o'clock, you can't request a transportation change after 2. Because here's what happens. At around that time, teachers and administrators begin to plan for dismissal. And there isn't someone always manning the phone. And so if at 2:45, you call the school and say, don't put, you know, little Davion on bus 1, his dad's picking him up, that message is not going to get to the teacher by the time we start loading the buses. So now little Davion gets on the bus, his dad comes to the school looking for little Davion, the teacher is like, oh, he went on the bus, and now there's no one at the bus stop to greet little Davion because dad came up to the school. And it becomes a nightmare. We understand that things happen last minute, and sometimes those things are unavoidable, but as a practice, we're not going to be accepting transportation changes beyond an hour from dismissal time, because we have to plan. And I've been in situations before where kids get lost. And I know that's terrifying for parents, but that's also terrifying for the teachers and the school leaders, because there's a last minute transportation change, things don't get communicated correctly, students on the wrong bus, or student was supposed to get on the bus but didn't get on the bus and is now in the building and doesn't have a way home. So that's why we need to have these policies in place, folks. I know they sound harsh. I know some of these policies will be inconvenient, but it is for the collective good. Anything else from online, Ms. Miller?
Kayla just says, please make sure all staff are on the same page with this. We have tried this in the past and there is never follow-up.
Yes, I agree, and none of these things matter if we don't follow through and do it consistently and have accountability. And we plan to have those three things: consistency, follow through, and accountability. And in the brief time that I've been here, I'm sure that my team will agree that I follow through and I hold folks accountable. And if I say I'm gonna do something, I do it. And I'm looking at the heads, people are nodding their heads in agreement. If I say I'm gonna do it, I do it, regardless of what it is. So yes, thank you for that comment. Anything else online?
Thank you, Kayla says, thank you, Dr.
You are welcome.
Tanya says, absolutely. Okay, we're good. Nope.
Any other comments? It is 7:48. I will stay here to the last person, but I'm hungry. And you know, right now some Popeyes sound good. Y'all know I love Popeyes. A 3-piece spicy sounds good right now. You sure can. And it's also hot in this room. If there is nothing else, those of you online, thank you so much for being here. Our next town hall is on Thursday. Families can attend any town hall at any of the school buildings. It will be the same content. I might give a little extra razzle dazzle for the next one based on the feedback that I get from today. But it's largely going to be the same content. So families, thank you so much. I appreciate the trust that you have placed in me by leading the zone. I do not take that lightly. Folks who attended tonight, thank you so much. I appreciate the disagreement and you all pushing me because I don't have all the answers. So you all pushing me helps me to think things through and helps us all to be better. So thank you and good night. You ain't got to go home, but you got to get out of here. All right, bye, folks.